My brother said I was too soft for business. Then my signature decided everything. The call came at 6 in the morning on a Tuesday, and I knew before I answered that something had finally broken. My brother's voice had that particular tightness I remembered from childhood, the sound he made when a situation had slipped beyond his control and he needed someone else to fix it. "We need to talk," he said. "Today. It's about the company." I sat on the edge of my bed and watched the early light come through the curtains, 40 years of history pressed into that silence between us. "I'm listening," I said. "Not on the phone. Meet me at the office, 10 o'clock. He hung up before I could respond, which was typical. Warren had never learned to ask. He commanded, and he expected the world to arrange itself accordingly. For most of our lives, I had been part of that accommodating world, but I had been paying attention in ways he never noticed, and I understood something he had forgotten. The company our father built required both our signatures on any significant transaction. Warren had spent 20 years pretending I was merely decorative. Now the decoration held the pen. I made coffee and sat in my kitchen, thinking about our father. He had been a careful man, a builder of small manufacturing concerns who understood that family businesses survive on trust and collapse on arrogance. When he divided the company between us, he structured it so that neither son could act alone. He told me once, in the last months of his life, that he worried about Warren. "He has the drive," my father said, "but he doesn't see people. He sees instruments." I think my father hoped the shared authority would teach Warren something about partnership. Instead, Warren spent 2 decades finding ways around me. The office building stood in the same industrial park where my father had started with a single warehouse. Warren had expanded it into a gleaming complex of steel and glass, a monument to his vision of what the company should become. I parked in the visitor lot, which was the only space Warren had ever assigned me. The security guard at the front desk looked surprised to see me. I hadn't been inside for nearly 3 years. Warren was waiting in the conference room on the top floor. He looked older than I remembered, though it had only been a few months since we'd spoken at our mother's birthday dinner. The confidence was still there in his posture, in the way he stood at the head of the table as though addressing a board meeting rather than greeting his brother. But there was something else now, a flicker of uncertainty that I had never seen before. "Thank you for coming," he said, which was itself unusual. Warren didn't thank people. He expected. I took a seat near the middle of the table and waited. The room smelled of coffee and the particular chemical scent of new furniture. Warren had redecorated since my last visit. Everything was sharp angles and expensive. Surfaces, the kind of aesthetic that announces ambition without warmth. "There's an offer on the table," Warren said. "A merger. Consolidated Manufacturing wants to acquire us. The terms are favorable." I nodded slowly. I had heard rumors of this for months. A former colleague had mentioned it over lunch, surprised that I didn't know the details. But I had learned long ago that Warren shared information on a need-to-know basis, and he had decided years ago that I didn't need to know anything. "The problem," Warren continued, "is that the deal requires unanimous consent from all founding family shareholders. That means you." There it was. The reason for the early morning call, the urgency in his voice, the unprecedented thank you. My brother needed something from me, and the realization was clearly costing him. "Tell me about the terms," I said. Warren slid a folder across the table. I didn't open it. I watched his face instead, reading the micro-expressions I had studied since we were boys sharing a bedroom. He was nervous. More than nervous. He was afraid. "It's a good deal," he said. "Better than good. It would make us both very wealthy." "We're already wealthy," I said. "This is different. This is generational wealth. Your children, your grandchildren. They'd never have to worry." I thought about my daughter, who worked as a teacher in a public school and had never asked me for anything. I thought about my son, who ran a small nonprofit and measured his success in lives improved rather than dollars accumulated. They had chosen their paths deliberately, and I was proud of them. "Let me read the documents," I said. "I'll need time." Warren's jaw tightened. "Time is something we don't have. The offer expires in 3 weeks. If we don't sign by then, Consolidated walks away. Then I'd better start reading." I took the folder and left without saying goodbye. In the elevator, I felt something shift in my chest, not anger exactly, something more like recognition. My brother had built his empire on the assumption that I was irrelevant, and now that assumption was crumbling. The question was what I intended to do about it. My father used to say that patience was the most undervalued virtue in business. He built his company slowly, brick by brick, relationship by relationship. He knew the name of every employee's spouse, remembered birthdays, attended funerals. When he retired, the warehouse workers gave him a handmade quilt with the company logo sewn into the center. He kept it on his bed until the day he died. Warren took a different approach. Within a year of assuming control, he had restructured the workforce, eliminated pensions, and outsourced manufacturing to cheaper facilities overseas. Profits increased dramatically. So did turnover. The employees who remained learned to keep their heads down and their opinions private. I watched all of this from the sidelines. My official title was Vice President of Community Relations, a position Warren created specifically to keep me occupied and out of his way. I attended charity events, signed occasional checks, and represented the family name at functions where Warren's abrasiveness would have been counterproductive. It was meaningless work, but I did it conscientiously. I believed, perhaps naively, that maintaining some presence in the company honored my father's memory. The truth, which I understood but rarely acknowledged, was that I had accepted my marginalization because fighting Warren required more energy than I possessed. He was relentless, and I was tired. After my wife passed away 5 years ago, the fight went out of me entirely. I retreated to my house, my garden, my grandchildren. I told myself that peace was more valuable than power, and most days I believed it. But something about Warren's desperation in that conference room rekindled an old flame. Not ambition, something more personal. A desire, perhaps, to be seen clearly for the first time in decades. My brother had spent 20 years treating me as an obstacle to be circumvented. Now, circumstance had made me essential, and I wanted him to understand what that meant. I spent the next 3 days reading every document in the folder. The merger was more complex than Warren had suggested. Consolidated Manufacturing was not simply acquiring our company. They were absorbing it into a multinational conglomerate with operations in 12 countries. The founding family would retain nominal positions on the board, but operational control would transfer entirely to Consolidated's executive team. Within 2 years, the company my father built would exist only as a logo on corporate stationery. The financial terms were indeed generous. Warren stood to receive approximately $40 million for his majority stake. My minority position would yield roughly $12 million. It was more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. And yet, as I read through the projections and the legal language, I felt something harden inside me. This was not a partnership. This was an erasure. I called my daughter on the 4th evening. She was grading papers and sounded tired, but she always made time for me. "Dad wants to sell the company," I said, "the one Grandpa started." She was quiet for a moment. "How do you feel about that?" It was a teacher's question, designed to draw out reflection rather than provide answers. I appreciated her approach. "Conflicted," I said. "It would be a lot of money, but it would mean the end of something, not just the business, something about who we are as a family." "Is Uncle Warren pressuring you?" "He needs my signature. Without it, the deal falls through." "That must be strange for him, needing something from you." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. My daughter had always understood the family dynamics more clearly than anyone else. "It is strange," I said. "I'm not sure he knows how to ask for things. He's only ever known how to take." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. I need more information." We talked for a while longer about her students, her plans for the summer, the new book she was reading. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room and thought about my father. He had trusted Warren and me equally, despite our differences. He had structured the company to require our cooperation because he believed that brothers should work together. What would he think if he could see us now, circling each other like negotiators across a vast divide? The next morning, I made some phone calls. I still had contacts in the business community, people who remembered me from the years when I was more involved. An old friend who worked in finance agreed to meet me for coffee. He told me things about Consolidated that Warren had not included in his folder. The company was leveraged heavily, carrying debt from a series of aggressive acquisitions. Their stock price had declined 15% over the past year. Several analysts had raised concerns about their leadership structure, which concentrated decision-making in the hands of a small group of executives with a reputation for ruthlessness. "They're not buying your company because it's valuable," my friend said. "They're buying it because they need the assets to secure more borrowing. Once the merger closes, they'll strip out everything profitable and discard the rest." "Including the workforce?" "Especially the workforce. Consolidated has a pattern. They acquire, they consolidate, they eliminate. Your father's company would be gutted within 18 months. I thanked him and drove home slowly, thinking about what I had learned. Warren must have known some of this. He was too smart not to have done his due diligence, which meant he had chosen not to share it with me. He wanted my signature, but he didn't trust me enough to give me the full picture. That evening, Warren called. "Have you finished reading the documents?" "I have questions," I said. "Then ask them." "Not on the phone. I'd like to meet with your lawyers. I want to understand the implications before I make a decision." There was a long pause. I could hear Warren's breathing, the slight catch that indicated frustration. "The timeline is tight," he said finally. "We don't have time for extended negotiations." "Then we'd better move quickly. Schedule the meeting for tomorrow." I heard him exhale. "Fine. I'll have my assistant send you the details." The meeting took place in a downtown law firm, the kind with mahogany paneling and original artwork on the walls. Warren brought 3 attorneys and a financial advisor. I came alone. They walked me through the documents again, explaining the terms in language designed to reassure. The attorneys were smooth and professional, answering my questions with the patient condescension of experts addressing a layperson. I let them underestimate me. I asked simple questions and nodded at their answers, giving no indication that I had spent the past week researching Consolidated's financial position and corporate history. But I also asked questions they didn't expect. I asked about employee protections. I asked about community commitments. I asked about the pension obligations that Warren had eliminated years ago and whether Consolidated would consider reinstating them. The attorneys glanced at each other. Warren's jaw tightened. "Those issues are beyond the scope of the merger agreement," one of the lawyers said carefully. "Then perhaps they should be included," I said. Warren leaned forward. "This isn't a negotiation. The terms are set. We either accept or we don't." "I'm aware of the terms," I said. "I'm asking whether they could be modified." "They can't." "Then I need more time to consider." Warren's face flushed. I recognized the color from our childhood, the particular shade of red that preceded his worst tantrums. But he was in a room full of professionals now, and he couldn't afford to lose control. "How much time?" he asked through clenched teeth. "A week." "That's too long." "Then you'd better hope I reach a decision sooner." I stood and gathered my papers. The attorneys watched in silence. Warren remained seated, his hands flat on the table, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond me. "I'll be in touch," I said, and left. The week that followed was the most revealing of my relationship with my brother. He called every day, sometimes twice. His tone oscillated between forced warmth and barely concealed threats. He reminded me of what was at stake, of the money we would lose, of the opportunity we would squander. He invoked our father's memory, suggesting that the old man would have wanted us to take the deal. He questioned my judgment, my business acumen, my understanding of the modern economy. I listened to all of it. I responded calmly, asking more questions, requesting additional documentation. With each conversation, I learned more about how Warren had managed the company in my absence. I discovered that he had taken on significant debt to finance expansions I knew nothing about. I learned that several key clients had left in recent years, citing concerns about quality and reliability. I found out that the board of directors, which Warren had packed with loyalists, had raised questions about his leadership that he had dismissed without consideration. The picture that emerged was not of a thriving enterprise ready for its next chapter, but of a company in decline, managed by a man too proud to acknowledge his mistakes. Warren needed this merger not because it represented opportunity, but because it represented escape. He wanted to cash out, before the consequences of his decisions caught up with him. On the fifth day, I received an unexpected visitor. A woman named Patricia Chen arrived at my door, introducing herself as a senior executive at Consolidated. She was polished and direct, the kind of professional who wastes no words. "I understand you have concerns about the merger," she said after I invited her inside. "I have questions," I corrected. "Then perhaps I can answer them." We sat in my living room, and she laid out Consolidated's vision for the acquisition. She was honest about their intentions in ways that Warren's lawyers had not been. Yes, there would be workforce reductions. Yes, the manufacturing facilities would be consolidated. Yes, the company my father built would eventually be absorbed into a larger corporate identity. "We're not pretending otherwise," she said, "but we're offering fair compensation to the shareholders and reasonable severance packages to affected employees. In the current market, that's more than many companies receive." "Why did you come here?" I asked. "Warren could have told me all of this." She paused, considering her words. "Your brother is a challenging partner. He sees every interaction as a contest to be won. We're concerned that his approach may have complicated your understanding of the situation." "You mean he hasn't been honest with me?" "I mean, he has been selectively transparent. There's a difference." I appreciated her candor. We talked for another hour, and by the end, I had a clearer picture of what Consolidated actually wanted and what they were willing to offer. The deal was not as straightforward as Warren had presented. There were contingencies, conditions, and escape clauses that he had not mentioned. Most importantly, there was flexibility in the timeline that he had insisted did not exist. After Patricia left, I sat in my kitchen and thought about what I had learned. My brother had lied to me. Not directly, perhaps, but through omission and misdirection. He had created artificial urgency to pressure my decision. He had concealed information that might have changed my calculus. He had treated me, once again, as an instrument rather than a partner. The realization should have made me angry. Instead, it made me sad. Warren was my brother. We had shared a childhood, a father, a legacy, and yet he had never been able to see me as an equal. Even now, with everything at stake, he could not bring himself to trust me. I called my son that evening. He listened without interrupting while I explained the situation. "What do you want to do?" he asked when I finished. "I want to do what's right," I said, "but I'm not sure what that means anymore. Maybe it means something different than you thought. Maybe being right isn't about the decision you make, it's about how you make it." I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. My father had taught me that character was revealed in difficult moments when the easy choice and the right choice diverged. He had built his company on principles that Warren had abandoned, principles of honesty and respect and shared responsibility. Perhaps honoring my father's memory meant more than preserving a corporate structure. Perhaps it meant insisting on the values that structure was meant to embody. The next morning, I called Warren. "I've made my decision," I said, "and I won't sign." The silence that followed was absolute. I could picture Warren in his office, surrounded by the monuments to his success, confronting the reality that his younger brother had just collapsed his most important deal. "You can't be serious," he said finally. "I've never been more serious about anything. Do you understand what you're doing? Do you have any idea what this means?" "I understand exactly what it means. It means the merger fails. It means you'll have to find another solution to the problems you've created. It means, for once in your life, you'll have to deal with the consequences of your choices. This is about spite. This is about punishing me because you've always been jealous of what I've accomplished. No, Warren, this is about integrity, something you stopped understanding a long time ago." He began to argue, to threaten, to plead. I listened until he exhausted himself, and then I said goodbye. The weeks that followed were turbulent. Consolidated withdrew their offer. The board of directors demanded answers that Warren could not provide. Financial analysts began asking uncomfortable questions about the company's debt load and declining revenues. The carefully constructed facade of Warren's success began to crack. I received calls from attorneys, accountants, and concerned board members. I answered their questions honestly, sharing what I knew and admitting what I didn't. Several of them expressed surprise at my engagement, having assumed for years that I was merely a figurehead. I told them that assumptions could be misleading and that silence was not the same as absence. In the end, the company survived, though not in the form Warren had envisioned. A new CEO was brought in, someone with a reputation for turnarounds and ethical leadership. Warren retained his shares, but lost his operational authority. He called me the day the transition was announced, his voice thick with something that might have been grief or might have been rage. "You destroyed everything I built," he said. "No," I replied. "I preserved what our father built. You were the one who tried to destroy it." He hung up without responding. We haven't spoken since. I think sometimes about what my father would say if he could see how things turned out. I don't believe he would be entirely happy. He loved both his sons, even the one who disappointed him. He would grieve the rift between us, the silence where brotherhood should be. But I think he would understand. He knew that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destruction. He knew that boundaries were not walls, but foundations, the structures that made genuine connection possible. He knew that being soft was not the same as being weak, and that true strength often looked like patience. My brother said I was too soft for business. Perhaps he was right in a way. I was too soft to sacrifice my values for profit, too soft to abandon the people who had built their lives around my father's company, too soft to pretend that loyalty meant compliance. But my signature decided everything, not because I wielded it as a weapon, but because I finally understood its weight. My father gave me that signature as a trust, a responsibility, a voice. For 20 years, I let it go unused, believing that peace meant avoiding conflict. Now I know better. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of justice, clarity, and self-respect. It is the quiet knowledge that you have acted according to your principles, even when the cost was high. I sit in my garden most evenings now, watching the light fade over the trees my wife planted years ago. The house is quiet. My grandchildren visit on weekends, filling the rooms with laughter and chaos. My daughter calls every few days. My son sends photographs from his work, faces of people whose lives are a little better because he chose service over accumulation. I think about Warren sometimes, alone in his expensive house, surrounded by the remnants of his ambition. I don't hate him. I'm not sure I ever did. But I no longer need his approval, his recognition, his acknowledgement that I matter. I know who I am. I know what I stand for. And in the end, that was enough.